Theologian David Bartlett writes this: "For many centuries, the poor symbolized Christ the poor. By assisting beggars, rich Christians honored Christ. However, during the late Middle Ages, the sudden increase of vagrants on the streets led to a change in attitude. Protestant reformers taught an ethic of hard work and self-reliance, but many beggars did not learn any new skills and kept on begging. Reformers considered these people too lazy and unworthy to receive charity. The church ended up aiding only the upper class, shamefaced sort, those who had suddenly lost their income in social upheaval and were reduced to poverty, but were too ashamed to beg. People no longer saw the image of Christ in those poor beggars, but feared them as carriers of contagious diseases and moral decay. Cities banned begging and cleaned up their streets by expelling them." I think this has been the great failing of the Christian church, where help has been a reward saved only for the truly deserving, or where help is offered with strings attached, usually in the form of required repentance or service as repayment. I think of church-run homes for unwed mothers as an example, where girls with no other support in their life were given shelter, but were treated as fallen women, foul sinners, often being deemed unfit to raise their own babies and having their infants forcibly removed from them. Of course, we know of stories from people raised in orphanages or residential schools that tell of terrors experienced in the care of people who were Christ's representatives on earth. Now, it's possible that those caregivers thought their harsh methods were ultimately helpful in that they were saving a soul, but history has proved that they did more harm than good by focusing on punishing the ones they thought of as sinners rather than nurturing the precious child of God in their care. Today's passage from James echoes Jesus' radical challenge to love your neighbor as yourself. Now you might wonder, isn't that impossible? I mean, it's surely problematic. David Bartlett writes that self-love can move us in many directions. At one extreme, self-love may take the form of narcissism. It's all about me. And at the other extreme, self-love, or loving your neighbor, may be taking the form of self-sacrifice. It's all about you. But James calls Christians to a higher standard, the standard of agape, or divine love. This love excels all other forms of love and is the distinctive call to Christians who wish to be God's helpers in a hurting world. Such divine love constitutes a radical call to unconditional justice wherever there is an economic gap between poverty and great wealth. For how can wealthy Christians live lovingly and justly when brothers and sisters, fellow Christians, people loved by God, live poor and destitute lives? In an ideal world of Christian faith, responding with divine love is the exact opposite of offering a conditional love and partiality. So what do we do? What can guide us now? Perhaps what's best is that distinction that James makes between a dead faith, a faith without works, and a living faith that is always accompanied by works. We are not saved by faith alone, and we are not saved by works alone. We are saved by faith and work conjoined. Spirit, body, and mind all together. In his op-ed given to the New York Times with the instructions to publish it when he died, civil rights activist John Lewis wrote this: "Like so many people today, in my youth, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in. And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said it's not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said that each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something." Now, 2,000 years before him, the Apostle James said, "Faith by itself is not, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." Essentially, you must do something. So I ask you, are we going to settle for being Christians who don't do anything? Do we just go to church and hang around? No way. Loving your neighbor and your neighborhood doesn't have to be something huge, something you save up all of your time and your resources for. It can be a string of simple acts of kindness, standing up for what is right, standing with the forgotten. To riff on Nike's famous slogan, just do it.